is Ardavan. I'm a client coordinator at the Launchpad Collective. Also, I'm a psychotherapist and assistant psychologist. I'm working with specifically neurorehabilitation clients in brain injury, and also I'm a counselor and therapist in a refugee charity. So today we are going to talk about trauma and specifically trauma in refugees. So we often heard the word trauma, but its meaning, its complexity, and its impact on daily functioning can be very different when we look at the experiences of people who have been displaced, persecuted, and or forced to flee their homes. So my aim today is to help uh, to give you an understanding about what trauma actually is, because you lots of uh, you hear it a lot, and especially as a refugee, maybe you have some problems with that. And also how it shapes people's lives, and why trauma in refugees can become particularly complex issue. So, what is trauma? When we talk about trauma, psychologically, trauma refers to an experience or a series of experiences that overwhelms a person's ability to cope. Trauma isn't just about something frightening or upsetting. It is about an event that exceeds a person's internal and external resources, leaving them feeling powerless, terrified, or profoundly unsafe. And trauma has lots of resources, can come from sudden events such as violence, war, torture, natural disaster, or sudden separation. It can also come from chronic experiences like persecution, poverty, or repeated threats over long periods of time. Trauma is not the event itself, it's the impact of the event on the mind and body. So it's very important that how we interpret events in our mind when we face them. Uh, so how trauma affects people's daily life and functioning. The problem is that trauma can change the nervous system. When someone lives through overwhelming stress, the brain remains in survival mode long after the danger is gone. The part of our brain that we call it amygdala becomes overactive, and the body remains on alert, scanning for threat. This can shape daily life in several ways. Like in emotional effects, you can experience anxiety, irritability, mood swings, numbness, emotional shutdown, or maybe it affects your cognitive, like lack of concentration, memory difficulties. It can affect your physical ability, like you may experience fatigue, sleep disturbances, pain, or it can affect your behavioral part, like you may experience avoidance, isolation, or emotional outbursts. Unfortunately, many refugees live with these symptoms while also trying to build a new life, study, work, or integrate socially. Trauma, therefore, doesn't remain in the past. It follows them into everyday decisions and interactions. And I experienced it once when I was in a hotel as an asylum seeker. I was working with some people, and I remember a Kurdish boy who came here through the canal, and he suffered from lots of experiences that we are going to explore more. And again, uh, it depends on the person, so it can be different. For example, when you may suffer from trauma, but you can see the effects in your life much or less than others. Trauma responses, facing a traumatic event, how people respond. When someone experiences a traumatic event, their system reacts automatically. Some people go into fight or flight, others freeze or shut down. None of these reactions are signs of weakness, they are the brain's survival mechanisms. I can give you an example. When you're driving and suddenly you look at the mirror and you can see, the police is coming after you, you may experience different or you may cope different in different ways. Like you may be you get freezed or you may get agitated or you may it reminds you lots of experiences from the past. For example, discrimination in your country and you are trying to predict what is happening next and your brain cannot analyze at that moment. Even after the event, a person may replay memories, avoid triggers, or feel on edge. But not everyone develops a trauma disorder. Many people show resilience, especially when they have supportive environments. So the good news about refugees is that based on the studies, lots of people with trauma as refugees, they show lots of capabilities after, they immigrate and they can reach and achieve uh, lots of things in a new country and sometimes overcoming even the experience of trauma from their home. However, for refugees, trauma is often not a single event. When you think about it, it may involve multiple layers. The trauma before leaving, the trauma during the journey, and the stress after arrival. For example, you may suffer from lots of traumas from home, but now in the new system, you need to adjust yourself. For example, now there's something called council tax, there is something called, gas and bill tax, and now you see yourself overwhelmed with these things, and you couldn't have enough time just to calm yourself down and just overcome your past traumas. So, because of that, it may lead us to post-traumatic stress disorder. Or PTSD is one way trauma that can manifest. The signs are re-experiencing the trauma, avoidance of reminders, negative change in beliefs and emotions, or sometimes hyperarousal and irritability. But not all trauma in refugees look like classic PTSD. Many experience complex PTSD, which stems from prolonged and repeated trauma. And it includes and it includes lots of difficulties with maybe, identity, emotional regulation, relationships and trust, shame and guilt. But why trauma in refugees is complex? So refugees do not experience trauma in a vacuum. Their trauma is shaped by war, conflict, torture, loss of family, dangerous journeys, uncertainty, detention, discrimination, racism. And this combination creates what researchers call multi-layered trauma. It is not just one event, but a chain of experiences. And refugees may appear withdrawn, avoidant, numb, or overly alert. The need of culturally sensitive support. So when we talk about trauma in refugees, supporting refugees requires to understand their cultural framework as well. Belief systems and the worldwide view of what is going on. Trauma is interpreted differently across cultures. Many express distress through physical symptoms rather than emotions. So, culturally sensitive support means we need to listen to each other without any assumption. We need to understand our cultural differences. We need to use interpreters effectively. We need to be patient, sometimes even with silence and disturb. We need to recognize cultural strength, rituals, and coping styles in different people, and considering the person's migration story, because every one of us uh, has his or her own specific narration and a story. So it's very important sometimes to understand each other with empathy, look at the world through each other's eye. And at the end, I need to add that refugee trauma is multi-layered. Healing begins with safety, trust, and cultural understanding. So, the first thing that we really recommend in that case is that you need to get support from professionals. And now, as we understand a bit about trauma and how it can lead us to experience PTSD, uh, I will just invite Erfan to talk about how it can affect in our uh, work environment as well.
Thank you so
Thank
much. I used to be a client of the Launchpad Collective, and I found my first employment through them, and I'm a senior HR advisor at Financial Ombudsman Service. Um, Ardavan raised very good points, the impacts and causes of trauma in our personal life, especially focusing on refugees. But I think what I want to focus on now is trauma in the workplace and how it affects our performance and function when we are working. Um, if I can see the first slide, please. Oh, that's the second one. Thank you. The causes and types of trauma in the workplace are very different. I think the two most causes of trauma are discrimination and bullying and harassment. Um, but discrimination comes in different forms. We have direct discrimination, which is very explicit, out there. You can just sense it, you can hear it, you can feel it. It's blunt, treating someone less favorably because they have characteristic that makes them stand out in comparison to the other groups of people. Um, if you, let's say, for example, decide not to recruit someone because of their gender or sex or because of their race, that is direct discrimination. Indirect discrimination is when a rule or a policy or a procedure is putting a person with a protected characteristic at a disadvantaged position. That's a more implicit discrimination. It's very layered, very hidden. Um, if I want to give an example, for example, let's say you come across a job advertisement for a role, and you see on the job advert says we are looking for someone with 10 plus years experience. When you say 10 plus years experience, you are indirectly excluding people who are in their 20s who have less work experience, and that's not a true indicative of someone's knowledge and experience in workplace. Um, Another one would be associative. So being discriminated against because you are associated with an individual or a group with a protected characteristic. Um, let's say, for example, treating someone less favorably by disciplining them for their attendance because they need time off to deal with their childcare needs, for example. Um, or discriminating against a female employee because you're associating them with their need to take maternity leave and go on leave. So that would be another associative discrimination. Perceived discrimination is treating someone less favorably because it's perceived that they have a protected characteristic. Let's say, for example, if you're coming from uh, a Middle Eastern country, a country with a Muslim majority background, if your employer assumes that you're coming from that country and you're Muslim, so that means you shouldn't do that or you should do that, and because of that, for example, they exclude you from their social um, groups or social hangouts or gatherings, that would be perceived discrimination. Victimization is when someone is subjected to detriment because they've made or supported a complaint or discrimination of discrimination. For example, let's say you've come across discrimination, someone discriminated against you, someone harassed you or bullied you, and you raised a complaint, you spoke to HR, and the manager who is at fault tried to take revenge by victimizing you, giving you a bad performance rating, or not making you eligible for pay review, let's say. Those are victimization, and that could affect someone's mental health and well-being at work. And obviously, bullying and harassment, which can come in different forms: power play, toxic work environment, and etc. etc. Um, and yes, so the third slide is about the impact of trauma. I mean, Ardavan pointed out some of these, which is basically the repeat of what Ardavan had mentioned. But when it comes to working and how you perform at work in the workplace, you can see people's reduced work performance and difficulties concentrating at work. So if you come across an employee, or if you find yourself not being able to concentrating on a task or a mission or at work in general, then that could be an impact of trauma after the traumatic incident. Employees being anxious, nervous, tearful, erratic with the how they express their emotions. Avoiding work tasks or areas in the workplace. Frequent requests for time off or sickness absence. This is very important because um, every organization check the sickness absence rate in their company, and if they notice someone is taking more than usual sickness absence, then that would raise an alarm, and they would try to see what could be the cause of it. I mean, if it's a company that has a good human resource team, they would notice that. Significant changes in an employee over a 6 week period or longer. So if someone's, let's say, lost significant weight, had a significant weight loss journey, or someone who looks tired, someone who looks distressed. So if you notice these significant changes over a 6 week period or longer, then that's more likely unusual. Can I see the next slide? Thank you. What should we do after the traumatic event? There are a series of things that we should do, and the list can go on and on for long. But I think the main ones would be, first of all, make sure that you are with people. You're in a safe environment. If you're living alone, reach out to a friend or a relative to stay with you or stay in touch with them. It's very important to not leave yourself by yourself after a traumatic event, because you would have a lot of um, you would feel guilt, you would blame yourself, you would overthink, you would be unkind to yourself, and then that would be the first stepping stone of doing or committing behaviors that would harm you consequently. So make sure you're safe and you're with people who you feel safe with. The second would be talking about it would help you to make the sense of events. So a traumatic event would happen. You will go through it. As I said, you will feel guilt. You might feel guilt, or you might feel bad, and you start blaming yourself. Um, but if you talk about this with someone you trust, you will get a different sense or version of events that would give you a clear indication of what happened. So make sure, as much as you would probably feel like, I have to detach myself, I don't need to socialize, I don't want to talk to anyone, try not to do that. If you have a few friends that you feel close with, or family or relatives, try to get in touch with them. Avoid using alcohol, sedatives, or sleeping pills because they prolong you dealing with your emotions and feelings. You have to feel the feelings that you go through after a traumatic event. You have to digest them. You have to express them. So if anything that prevents you from that, you're not getting over those feelings. You're just delaying how to and when to process those feelings. And also, the next point fits into the point that I just read. Allow yourself time to deal with the memories. Um, think about it, talk about it, allow yourself to digest it, comprehend it, but don't ignore it. Don't just brush it under the carpet, because it's not going to help. Even if you feel detached from other people, do not reject their support. So if someone offers their support, it can be a counselor, at work, your manager, family, friend. Don't reject their support, because that's when you need most of the support. Make sure you know the facts of what happened rather than relying on your own memory. So sometimes what happens to you, especially with the shock that comes after, you don't have a clear sense of what happened, and your brain might intentionally try to clear that from your memory. So try to get evidence, um, and understand what exactly happened if you can. And work on your general stress levels by ensuring that you have adequate sleep, good diet, and regular exercise. Obviously, we need to have this in generally, but this would help you better to cope with trauma, and adapt your body faster and quicker after a traumatic event. Can I see the last slide, please? What role human resources can play? Obviously, human resource is the department or area in any workplace that should deal with safeguarding issues, with traumatic people who dealt with traumatic events. The first step that every organization or every HR team needs to take is prevention. We have to make sure that we're preventing the traumatic event to happen first, and then if it happens, then we deal with it. How we can prevent it, we have to have good communication in place between people, employees and managers. And our managers have good people management skills that can help prevent stress and poor mental health. Um, if employees feel safe to talk, to speak up and express themselves, that shows there is less chance to have traumatic events at work happening, or bullying, harassment, and etc., or discrimination. Um, Early intervention would be the next layer of it. So if we see someone who is dealing with severe stress or they have poor mental health, that would be early intervention. You have to be very quick, very agile, and proactive in picking up the first signs. And if you see the first signs, don't ignore it. Try to investigate and just reach out. If you're working in the HR, just reach out to the employee. Hey, I just want to check on you. Is everything okay? How is everything? Tell me about your day, about your week. Just open questions, conversation, and you can do that with your colleagues as well, not just from HR point of view. Um, Supporting people to return to work. So people go on sick leave because of stress, anxiety, mental health issues. We have to make sure that the support they need to come back to work is provided by the organization and by the HR. This could come in various forms. Sometimes they need physical assistance. Sorry. Then we need to make sure that the equipments they need is provided. Sometimes they don't feel comfortable working in the same place with the person who caused the traumatic event. Um, then we have to see what resources are available to change that kind of environment in a way that they don't come across each other. So there are all sorts of things depending on the context and situation that you can support people to return to work. Because obviously we want people to come back to work. We don't want them to um, get made redundant or leave work or quit because of something they went through. It's not their fault. Um, Support across the employee life cycle, and that when we say employee life cycle, it just doesn't mean after we recruit someone. It also means during the recruitment. So when we, let's say, advertise a role or a job on our platforms, we have to make sure we give all the candidates the opportunity from all backgrounds, all conditions that they are dealing with. They have equal opportunity to compete against other candidates for a role. So that could be a disability scheme that is um, kind of the rule and policy in this country. Make sure that is included on the job advert, and we are not excluding those who are dealing with disability. Um, and managing performance obviously is the main point. If you feel like someone's performance is dropping, they're not performing as they were, as they should, you're seeing clear signs of downside in how they communicate, how they work, how they function, then that is something that needs to be picked up by HR and human resources and the managers to set objectives, to see where the issue is coming from, have those conversations, and trying to pick up those troubleshoot and pick up those signs or elements that is causing the drop in performance. Um, That's from me. Any questions, anything that I've missed mentioning?